go and with these cubes rubbing against you, you look inside the cells and stuff. And then we came back to this into the pit area where I was, where the wide dusty road was. We kind of going down a little bit further and further, and we just went past cell after cell. And I wrote in my book, a chapter, and I want to illustrate this chapter because the more I think about it, this is, I think, why the Lord brought me back. And I call the chapter Dear Pudding. And Dear Pudding, I saw this lady who died, and she recently died when I died, and she dropped and deposited into a cell right in front of me, and through a tornado vortex. She stood there in front of this cell and knocked on the door because she saw her own mind. She didn't see hell. She saw this was my grandparents' farm. She knocked on the door before she could knock. Her grandmother opened the door, and she went into the cell, and so this lizard breath and I walked up and looked inside. And so I was just stared for the longest time at this. I knew all about her life history in a second. And she thought she was a great mother and great, she was perfect. She was the head of the PTA, and she was a pillar of the community and all these things. And people would call her the best and nicest person in the world. But what you didn't see was her secret self. She had kids, and she should say, you will not be an astronaut. You will not be a truck driver. You will not be a homemaker. You're going to be a dentist. You're going to be a doctor and get a hairbrush and beat her kids until they submit. And that's a side no one saw. She was a control freak and had this image. And so that's why she was there. Oh. And so she was there, and then she thought she was in paradise. Now, if she was resuscitated right then and there, she would have, because science can resuscitate you from the dead, in a certain amount of time. If she would have came back at that instant, she would be on Oprah and all the talk shows saying, don't be afraid to go to the light. Don't be afraid, because you're going to paradise. I saw paradise. It was lovely there. I met my grandmother, and all my dead relatives were meeting me there, greeting me there. Very similar to what happened to me when I entered, seeing people coming up to me and saying, welcome, Brian, to paradise. I was not in paradise, and she wasn't in paradise. And so I wrote that chapter. Let me finish this here. I wrote this chapter, and here she is. And her deception was so incredible. And she could see this grand place in her grandparents' farm that she loved as a kid. And her grandmother said, come, dear Pudding, let's go. Go out back. Went out the back. There's your favorite spot over by there. You have eternity here. Can't you feel the love here? And the love there is not God's love. It is an sick love. It's a deceptive love. And she goes, yes, grandmother, I do. She says, I'm going to go back inside, dear Pudding, and bake you your favorite cookies. And now I could see her grandmother as the demonic entity. All the chairs, everything was an entity that gave the illusion of a prop. Now she walked, it was like the floor would move and the scene in her mind would change, even though she was in a small cell. Best I can describe would be like Star Trek, The Next Generation. They had that holodeck thing. It's very similar to that. And she was in a small thing, and as she went over to her favorite place, was by a looked like a stream. There is no water in hell, absolutely none. But she saw water. It's an illusion. She reached her hand in it and pulled up sand, and then she just under shades of these two trees, but they were like I'd call them squid-like entities, look like trees to her, with all these tentacles like branches, and they had eyes. I just remember this, and that's like, you want to say, don't sit. You can't say nothing. You're standing there saying, Jesus Christ, watching this, and that what a evil person she was and control freak she was, and how she beat her kids and how she tormented her husband, how she did everything to get her way. And on the surface, she made herself look like a saint. And she reached in there and said, I'm not in paradise. Then those three tentacle things reached and grabbed her, and she screamed so loud I can still hear it today. It freaks me out. And we turned and we kept going to the next cube. And so I say that is that people who die and all these NED experiences that are so pleasant, um, deception. I saw deception. I saw people arrive in this place thinking they met their ancient gods or their pagan gods, only to wake up too late that they were deceived, thinking that they were in paradise. And the reason why a lot of these people come back, and I talk to some of these folks and they don't believe me, that's fine, because it's an overwhelming experience to die, as you know, Randy, to come back. And these people, I try to talk to them, but you were deceived. Oh, no, I wasn't. Well, I understand what you're saying because I saw it. And so this deception, and so if they were brought back to life too soon, they'd carry the devil's lie that you can live any way you please. You're going to make heaven. You're going to be in paradise. You're going to meet all your dead relatives, so forth, etc. And that's exactly what I saw. I saw it time and time again in that place.
Wow.
Time again in that place.
Wow. I'm mesmerized. You said something interestingly enough to begin before we started. You said, I knew you had, to me, you said, I knew you had an NDE